As always, we invite ourselves as we begin our meditation practice to come into presence with our being in this moment. How is it? How is it to be you, to be here, there, in this body, in this life? You might notice that often when we check in with ourselves, we sort of start with our head, with the thoughts or maybe the emotions that are passing through. I'm going to invite us to go in the other direction. Maybe in terms of how it is right now, let your awareness drop down through your body and check in with your toes. How are your toes doing? You could even wiggle them a little bit. Check in, see if they wiggle. Are your toes okay right now? Sometimes we can get so caught up with things that are not okay, it's hard to remember the places that are okay. Are your toes okay right now? Check in with them, ask them. Is there anything that your toes need to be a little bit more okay? How about your feet? Are your feet okay? How is it for your feet to be resting on the ground or the floor or the cushion? Do they like that? Do your feet feel supported? Is there anything they need? Ask them. We can move our inquiry into the lower part of our legs and maybe up into our knees. How are our legs and knees doing right now, tonight? Are they okay? Do they need anything? Similarly with our thighs and our hips. Sometimes as we move into our bodies, we might find some achiness. Maybe some achiness that we can't fix. Do our hips and legs and knees need us to care? to send some care, like we might send a little teddy bear to a small child. Our legs, knees, and hips are needing some comfort. As we come into our hips, I would invite us to just move our hips maybe back and forth and side to side a little bit. Often we're sitting in a position that is just a little bit off balance. And if we wiggle just a little bit, we can find a space where our body goes, oh, yeah, I like that. That's perhaps just a tiny part of an inch even, a little bit different from where we started. And just check it out, wiggle a little bit and see if there's some way that the hips, as I do it, I notice that my hips are just leaning a little bit forward, and what they really want is to relax back a little bit. Check in with your torso. Does your torso want to move just a little bit, again, to find what's an upright, relaxed balance? How is that part of your body doing? Is it okay? Does it need your care? How about your shoulders, your arms, your elbows, your wrists, your hands? Are they working too hard? Would they like a rest? Are they okay? Bringing awareness back up through your arms into your neck. Feel your head just balanced up there on the top of your spine. Notice any quality of okayness in this body right now. And any quality of care that there might be, or any stress or strain or ouchiness that you might find. That can't be easily fixed. Notice that this body is breathing. as we relax and notice carefully, we can notice that at the end of the breath, both the end of the in-breath, for me it's a little more clear at the end of the out-breath. There's a little pause there where we're not quite sure what's going to happen next. See if it's possible to notice that pause and to just relax with it. Trusting this body to know what it's doing. Our meditation practice is a practice of being in the present. And we're invited to relax with our bodies, to find a quality of ease. And trust it. Trusting this breath. Trusting the pause, the empty space. This body knows what it's doing. It knows how to do it. You can relax and observe. We all sentient beings, boundless as the sky, receive the benefits of our practice together. All beings know happiness and the causes of happiness. Free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings in every direction be safe, protected, happy, and well. A number of questions have come up about confusion, so I thought I'd offer some thoughts tonight about working with confusion, and I want to cover, if we can, 4 points. One is why it really seems like a good idea to not be confused, why it's important to not be confused. One thing I want to. Another is the limitations, the problems sometimes of not being confused. the problems of not being confused, the blessings of allowing ourselves to be confused, and the ways that it's really good news to allow ourselves to be confused, and just some of our practice with it. So we'll see how that goes. So we all know the experience of confusion. There's a line that I enjoy from the music of The King and I, where the king is struggling because his world is kind of falling apart. You know, the things that his father taught him and knew to be true, he's been a little challenged. And he says, sometimes I almost think, how does it go? Sometimes there are times I almost think I am not so sure of what I absolutely know. And we kind of all know that, you know, sometimes I'm not so sure. Sometimes I almost think I'm not so sure of what I absolutely know. But lots of times we really want to be sure of what we absolutely know, and we come by it honestly. In millennia of evolution, our human brain has learned that it's a good idea to kind of know what's going on, to be able to communicate that to other people or to other animals, so that you can together escape the cheetahs in the bushes. Or in my case, tonight, as I was driving here in the dark and the rain, getting confused about, where is that turn again? I actually made a wrong turn on the way here. You know, so to not be confused, to have the ability to filter information and not be confused, and to share that information about safety and goodness and wellness has been programmed into our being, into our brains over millennia of evolution. Is this still working? Did it stop working? Is it still working okay? It sounds funny. Is it all right? All right. Yeah, it's sort of stopped. Are we still good online? You hear me okay? Yeah, okay. All right. So not being confused can really not only seem to be, but can be a normal human and good thing. That capacity to kind of know what's what, and to be pretty sure about the way from my house to, you know, the Unitarian Church in the dark and the cold. It's a good idea to not be confused. Psychologist Tim Wilson says that at this exact moment, each of us has 11 million neurons that are firing. 11 million neurons. At this exact moment, every second, there are 11 million neurons firing that are taking in information from the world. It's a good idea to not be confused by 11 million neurons. Can you know, imagine if on the way here, not only did I have to navigate all the information, but if I had to navigate all 11 million of them, which at some level I suppose I did, but we have this ability to filter it and to not be confused. Nevertheless, not being confused, this ability to do that presents some very real problems. Tim also says in his research that we can be conscious at any given moment. I've forgotten how they measured this. It made sense when I read it, but I've forgotten what it was. But that at any given moment, we are conscious out of that 11 million of 40. Which means, what's the math there? 10,999,960 bits of information in any given moment we are not conscious of. So on the one hand, it's efficient, it's a good idea, but on the other hand, this capacity that we have to filter information really eliminates an enormous amount of information from our awareness. We then take this limited information as what we know to be true. Much of what we know, this is Joanna Macy, she says, much of what we, quote, know comes not from our immediate experience then, but from constructs that have been created by our previous conditioning, and which in turn have conditioned our processing, our ability to take in this information. The environment is not perceived immaculately, but rather is recognized and interpreted in terms of forms and concepts that we have learned to see. We can understand that, those of us who've traveled in very different cultures, can really appreciate the ways that our culture has learned to see certain things in certain ways that are different. So much of what we know or think we know then is because of the conditioning of those, 40 that we've learned from our families, we've learned from our culture how to see. Andrew Holacek says, the nature of the conceptual mind is to shrink wrap reality. I like that. It's like, so these 40, they shrink wrap our reality, and then that's what we know to be true. Kyodo Rinpoche says, we live in illusion and the appearance of things. And that's what he means. So we live in illusion and the appearance of things. It's a good idea if I'm trying to get in the rain from my house to the Unitarian Church to shrink wrap reality. It's a good idea if I'm looking to find my shoes in the morning. So there are many good things about not being confused, but there are some ways in which it really limits us. So another way that what we know to be true is further limited is that as we grow, the capacity of our conceptual mind also grows, so presumably, and we all know the experience, like with a little child who knows certain things to be true. I like to read, sometimes the Huffington Post has these tweets from parents this week, in the week, and there'll be something from a parent who says, just to let you know that there is a correct way to peel a banana, and if it's not done that way, the world will end. So that little children have a way of perceiving reality that is quite, we can recognize as quite limited. My friend Bob Marvin gave me this as the things that rules that toddlers have, that toddlers know to be true, 2 to 3 year olds, what toddlers know to be true. If I like it, it's mine. If it's in my hand, it's mine. If I can take it away from you, it's mine. If I had it a little while ago, it's mine. If it's mine, it must never appear to be yours in any way. We can notice some grown-ups who have ideas like this. Some of you are nodding. If we are building something together, all the pieces are mine. If it just looks like mine, it's mine. If I think it's mine, it's mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If I give it to you and change my mind later, it's mine. If you are playing with something and put it down, it automatically becomes mine. If it once was mine, it must never appear to be yours in any way. If it's broken or needs cleaning up, it's yours. So, you know, that, and these are rules that toddlers will die by, you know, that the suffering that we see them in the grocery stores or in our grandchildren, you know, that our children, we see these rules, you know, there's a correct way to peel a banana. And if it's not done that way, the world will very likely end soon. And as we grow and develop the capacity to see things more deeply, more broadly, to incorporate more information, those filters hopefully change. And we know that as people go through those developmental stages, that there's a whole period of disorganization and real confusion. And it keeps going infinitely long. Our conceptual strategies can be overwhelmed not only by our developmental level, by the amount of data, by those 999, I forget. Anyway, those lots of data that we're not consciously processing, but also by the fact that life is hard. We've noticed. It's the thing that the Buddha noticed, where he went out on that famous chariot ride, and he saw people who were sick and old and dying and dead. And he went, oh, does that happen to everybody? You know? And so the uncertainty that's what's called existential anxiety, that is very real for all of us when we note what's really true about this human experience and this human life. You've heard me quote a greeting card that I like, which the front of it says, I think I just quoted it not too long ago, where the front of it says, "Things I've learned. A universal remote control does not, in fact, allow you to control the universe." You know, inside it says, "I was going to get you a universal remote control for your birthday, but believe me, you would just be disappointed." You know? But we really kind of go through life, don't we? You know, we get sick, or somebody we love gets sick, or somebody dies. I had a friend who died very suddenly, just Saturday. Somebody dies, and we go, there's something wrong here, you know? That we want to believe that we're much more in control of this human life than we actually are. And so when we really, like the Buddha on that chariot ride, when the Buddha went out, he was kind of overwhelmed with confusion. He said, this isn't what my father told me life was like. Is this really what's true? And so we can have little intimations of that. And then imagine that somehow there's something wrong with us if we're really getting it, that life can be confusing and uncertain, and there is impermanence, and we are not in charge. Another way that trying to be certain can be troublesome is that sometimes, maybe you've noticed this recently, I have, sometimes just the amount of data that we're asked to process can be really overwhelming. I've found that with some of the news lately, that there's just so much that we're asked to know or understand or relate to or maybe respond to, that our nervous systems can just get like shut down or clouded or overwhelmed. You know the feeling, of just like, I just I can't take in another thimbleful of information. And we just want to shut down because our system gets overwhelmed with too many bits of information and too many bits of maybe difficult information and things that we can't control. There's a quote that I found. Is actually from the Huffington Post. He says the human brain is a classification machine. It has to be to survive. The human brain is a classification machine that has to shrink wrap reality in order to survive. But it can also be incredibly lazy. Psychologists call it heuristics, those quick, energy-saving shortcuts that let you spot patterns and threats without thinking too hard about them. They're efficient in the wild, when a rustle in the grass might mean danger. But in a coffee shop, they mostly just expose how fast we build bullshit stories about people we've never met. Would-be autocrats and strongmen know this. They depend on it. Authoritarian politics thrives on division because clarity, even false clarity, feels safer than complexity. Us and them, patriots and traitors, law and chaos. It doesn't even matter which words they choose, only that the line stays bright and absolute. Once we accept the framing, we stop seeing individuals and start seeing teams. From there, almost anything becomes possible. And it really helps me understand, some of what's happening, that people can exploit that quality of our human brains, of our human minds, and of our sense of, maybe I'm vulnerable to cheetahs. In fact, ultimately, I am. I've told some of you the story when I was in Bali one year. I was sitting in the coffee shop. I was sitting in Starbucks, actually, in Bali. And John Denver is singing about West Virginia on the music loop. And 3 men in black with guns walked in. And 2 of them went in the back room, and one of them sat down at the table across from me and pointed his machine gun at me. Yeah. And I went, I wonder what this is. And sure enough, after a while, the other guys came out and they all wanted, then he picked up his phone and he started scrolling, and I figure he's probably not going to shoot me. That he was just one of the Brinks guys who was coming to collect the money today. But it was a bit, it's like my little brain was initially wanting to shrink wrap reality there. It's like, oh my goodness, what is this? Is this a cheetah in the bushes? What's going on here? So the goodness of not being confused is ordinary development in thought and concept that try to make us feel more safe and stable in a very complex, impermanent, challenging human existence. I want to pause there for a second. I want to go into the goodness of allowing confusion. But I just want to pause there. Anyone want to add anything or question or wonder or anything? Want to say anything? Yeah.
Your Bali story reminded me of the first time when I was in Israel, and I wasn't used to having military people with machine guns sit next to me on a bus. And the first couple times it was fairly alarming. And the Israeli family that we were staying with at the time said, oh, you'd much rather that they be on the bus, because if they're not on the bus, it means they're on the front getting ready to fight.
So your conceptual mind then found a way of, and like for me to say, oh, it's just the Brinks guys, you know, that your conceptual mind found a way to put that in a category where it was like, it's okay, I'm safe. Good, thank you. And it happens all the time, doesn't it? But we sometimes don't notice that we're shrink wrapping reality. It's not quite so easy. You're also pointing, Linda, you're also pointing to another piece of it, which we'll get to, which is sometimes we need other people to both help us calm down and to expand our view, to make it a little bit safer, to allow confusion or uncertainty. Oh, good. Anybody else have something? How about you folks online? You good? I mean, I know you're good, but anything you want to say? No? Okay. All right, I want to talk a little bit about the goodness of allowing confusion, because that was where the question came in. Somebody said, you know, I just get so confused, and, you know, how do I be with it? And we sort of left it just allowing it, and it's like, really? Seriously? Just allowing confusion? So when we really start paying attention, partly because we just grow, partly because we go to Israel and we have new experiences, partly because we talk to people who challenge us, all kinds of reasons. When we really start paying attention, we have to keep reworking our constructs, as some of those constructs or rules of how we interpret our experience start to break up. And when those constructs, those filters start to break up, our initial experience is inevitably confusion. We don't go straight from, you know, oh, there's a guy on the bus with a machine gun, to it's all fine. We really have to work with it a little bit. So when we really start paying attention, and we start to get more information, and those constructs, those filters start to break up, we go through a period of confusion, inevitably. There's nothing wrong with us when that happens. It's like the 2-year-old who's learning that just because I touched it doesn't make it mine. Damn. You know. I have to now learn how to deal with other people and with disappointment. And is there anybody here who hasn't had to learn that in relationship? You know, how to relate to other people when their filters are not exactly the same as ours. It's challenging. Maybe you've noticed. The other thing, which is especially relevant for us here tonight, is that as we meditate, as we learn to be present and sit with our experience, guess what happens? Some of those missing 999,900,000, I forget how it goes, some of those missing data pieces start to surface. And it inevitably, if we're meditating well, it's inevitable that we will find ourselves confused. And if we don't understand what's happening, we can think there's something wrong. Either there's something wrong with the practice, or there's something wrong with me, or more likely, when we start, what I do when I start getting confused like that is I start running a story about how that's like that thing that happened when I was 4, and my father, and and the story, and it's like, the same story that I've run probably 999 million times before. That we start to try to figure it out with our conceptual minds. And that's that place very often when we're with our experience and we find ourselves kind of wandering off into thinking, especially if we're kind of with our emotional experience, and then we're wandering off into stories because it's our conceptual mind that's just trying to help us out. That's just trying to say, I know how to make sense of this, which may or may not make sense of it and may or may not be helpful. Because what that tends to do is to try to push our experience back into that little conceptual frame and not allow it more space, more airtime, not allow us to grow and expand and deepen. But it's inevitable that that will happen. So that if we're really growing and living as human beings, and if we're really practicing our meditation practice, there's no way around being confused. So that was where I think we left it at one of the talks. It's like, so could you be kind? Could you notice that some of your concepts are just loosening, breaking apart, like the Buddha on his chariot ride where he went, oh my goodness, this is different. This isn't what I thought the world was like. I want to pause there again. Well, let me read a couple quotes and then you'll see what you have to say, and then we'll talk a little bit about our practice, but yeah, we'll talk a little bit about our practice. So with growth and maturity and lots of good paying attention, especially in relationships that tend to challenge us, we all start to almost think we are not so sure of what we absolutely know. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. This is Mingyur Rinpoche. You've heard me say this a million times. It's one of my favorite quotes. He says, confusion, I was taught, is the beginning of understanding. The first stage of letting go of what he calls the neuronal gossip. I love that used to keep you chained to very specific ideas about who you are and what you're capable of. So he says, it's that confusion is the beginning of letting go, loosening up that neuronal gossip, those filters that we're so used to, that I know that if I touch it, it's mine. I know that's true. And so that neuronal gossip, it's like, well, what if it's not exactly like that? What if it's not exactly true? This is Anna Douglas. She says, the path of liberation begins by making contact with the truth of our actual experience. This puts us in touch with our conditioning, the trance of thoughts and feelings and emotions and beliefs that we have learned to call me. To awaken from this trance is our task, to discover an enlarged sense of self that is both intimately connected with all life and free from that which constricts and keeps us trapped in a spin of confused certainty. I invited you, so in terms of practice, that was what I was aiming for in the guided meditation, of lots of times when we look to see what's true, we actually land pretty solidly in our conceptual minds. If I say, how is life for you today? You might talk about, or I might talk about the news that I read, or, my actions or my activities or whatever. But I might not, as a first move in that inquiry, wonder how my toes are doing. And I've spoken before. The one time I was away at a retreat, and I can't remember what exactly it was, but just before I had gone on the retreat, I had some very disturbing personal news. So I was on this 7-day retreat, and my little mind was just going through its filters like crazy. And I was doing walking meditation, and my brain was just kind of working overtime. And I paused and I just said, is there anything, let me just check in with my body. Is there anything that is sort of okay? I'm pretty agitated. And I discovered that my toes were fine. And it really helped, So the invitation really is to notice the pull to our conceptual mind, which is the pull to the evolutionary conditioning. That is good. It got me from my house to this building tonight, so it's a good thing. It's just more limited than I want to think it is. So that when I'm in this place of confusion, my first move might be to try to figure things out and or tell stories about, I know what this is about. If I have a difficulty in a relationship, I know what this is about. This is just like that thing that happened when I was 4, And then I'm off to the races and remembering that for the, 4 millionth time. So the invitation is to look directly into our experience and to allow ourselves to relax enough, with enough ease. Again, that was part of the practice tonight. To allow ourselves with enough ease in our body, where our bodies are happy and welcoming places for us to see what else wants to be noticed. What else is here to learn? Sometimes it really sometimes I need. Yesterday I was feeling really overwhelmed with all the news, and I called one of my teachers. I said, I need a little grounding here. I need a little clearing. I need a little help. It really helped a lot. So sometimes we really need, when our nervous systems are kind of overwhelmed, we really need the help and the guidance of someone else who in that particular moment isn't as overwhelmed, whose nervous system in that particular moment is more organized and settled. So relationship that is wholesome and wise, dropping into our bodies and really being willing to welcome experience that is difficult without requiring it to be immediately forthcoming. One of the problems that I have, we often talk about being with your emotions, and sometimes we speak of this process of being aware of the physical body and the physical sensations of the emotions, and we say if you just do that, then it will break up, it will open. Maybe. But it sounds sometimes like, well, you just do it and it's simple and don't be stupid. And there are a number of ways where that doesn't exactly happen that way. Sometimes things are very strongly conditioned. Sometimes things are very intense. Pema Chodron gave an example of someone who had PTSD and was working with some of the emotional experience and the confusion about having seen his buddies killed, and that she very wisely invited him to pay attention to his body's experience, 1 or 2 seconds at a time, and then to move away from it. So sometimes we can have this sense that, what we're really supposed to be doing is kind of drilling down and or having some kind of immediate response. But it is true that our practice works like that if we pay attention, things open up. So if we pay attention to those 11 million and just invite a few more of those 11 million neurons to make themselves consciously known, it is true that they will, but it isn't necessarily true that they will do it on our own timetable. And it definitely isn't true that they will do it if we're cranky about it. And if we keep demanding that it work out the way our conceptual mind thinks it should. So the practice is really to kind of welcome confusion as an opportunity to grow, to expand, to learn something, to develop. Sometimes what we learn is that we need to set limits in some way. So it isn't like we somehow just become pieces of spaghetti. But we learn what's needed in this moment and in this circumstance. And we relax, allow it. For me, what was needed is I needed to turn. I missed that left turn. I need to turn right and find a driveway to turn around in so I can go back and retrace my steps. Calmly, quietly, without it being a statement about my fundamental worth as a human being. Can we allow our confusion as a doorway to inquiry, as a question? Emptiness, John Tarrant says, is what's left when you take away the thoughts and beliefs that you have constructed around an event, and not knowing is a way to move in the absence of such thoughts. It is a creative possibility. Not knowing who you are allows you to meet an event without pretending it is something else, something that happened before. Then you might experience just what is happening, something unpredictable, delightful, dangerous, safe, eating a taco or walking down the street. And then Angel Kyodo Williams says, grace, the insight, the clarity, the knowledge of what's needed. Grace is the composure that comes naturally when your thoughts are no longer able to shift your mind away from the details of this moment. So it brings us right back to our practice, a practice of paying attention to the details of this moment. It is inevitable. If we are practicing well, our practice will disorganize us. That's good practice. Not because being disorganized is our ultimate goal, but because opening wider and wider and deeper is the point of our practice. So we get to see directly in our own experience that it's really true that only love is real. Everything else is illusion. And we get to see it and experience it directly. That's why we're practicing. It's okay to be confused.